The one thing though that is still a problem on this model is the size of the textures.
Right.
They're just enormous, and we can see that if we go and look at the actual files. You'll see that the they're just crazy, out of control. So um,
We probably got rid of one of them, right? Because the base was probably one of those.
yeah, I think
Do
the
you want to open
base.
up that? Can you do that in Explorer?
Yeah, I don't think I have it on the stream
Oh,
though,
okay.
but if you were to look at the texture size, you could actually see that it was a 4K texture. There were two
Right.
4K textures. That's
Interesting that it said it was
4096.
8,000 by 8,000, and then it was 4K. Interesting.
I think when Sketchfab converts it to a GLTF, I think they have a
The
cap,
maximum, yeah.
and
Okay.
so it reduced it.
Still 4K, very large.
Yep. So okay, looking pretty good. I'm gonna switch over to like the shading tab in here with the object selected, and you can see when it brings in this GLTF, it also um, brings in it sort of reconstructs its material,
Hmm.
and you can see that this thing it's a little more complicated than it needs to be. It these has one texture here and another texture here. I think they're the same texture. Um, it looks to be the same, so I don't know what they're plugged into. It looks like it was doing some kind of
It's
mixing.
like,
Oh, it's an emissive texture.
oh, okay.
So it's exporting it as if it were like self-illuminated.
Right.
I don't know that we need all that
No, I think that's good actually, because
because it has the
it
lighting
has the
built
lighting
in.
baked into it, so it's always going to be that. I mean, it just depends on what you're going for.
Yeah, we'll leave it
We actually
alone.
might want to get rid of the emissive so that it's affected by lights.
Oh, that's true. If it
Otherwise, it's not going to. So that's a thing to be aware of is like emissive is, yeah, it's not affected by lights at all. So, um,
so it'll just look bright, even if we to turned
yeah.
all the lighting down in our spoke scene, this thing would be like glowing bright. No, when I say glowing, I don't mean like has a haze around it or something. It's
Hmm.
just going to be fully lit.
Yeah. I think emissive probably was on the original model.
Hmm
I don't know.
Um, in again, I don't want to get too in the weeds here in Blender with the shader editor, but the basic idea here is instead of this whole lower section, which we need, um, versus the upper section, which is you'll find this one node called emission.
Hmm.
We don't really need this upper section, so I can actually go ahead and select all of that and just hit delete. Um, Now it's like, what's going on? It
We'll have
looks
to
weird
bring
on
up
here.
that.
I have to fix that. It's also still piping the main part of this node called principled BSDF, which I'm
Mhm.
not going to get super in detail about that, through an add shader node. We don't need that either. But what we do need is this to go directly into the surface.
Cool.
And there's a bunch of other junk here we don't need. Really, all you need is the texture itself, which is this node.
It's doing multiply by black.
Yeah, we just need to pipe this directly
Yeah, let's just
into
take that
the
directly
base
too.
color.
Cool.
There it is. And then we can ditch these guys. Like we don't need any of this. Um,
Nope.
I might do another tutorial another day to show how you can use the vertex colors to create a texture and stuff like that. But
That was interesting though, because it was multiplying by black,
I
which
don't
would
know.
basically mean like it's not actually using the base color.
Very weird.
Yep. Anyways.
Really, all you need is this. You need the base color piped into the base color of the principled BSDF node, and then outputting to the surface material output.
Yep.
And then it'll look like that. And now it actually is affected by lighting. So if I were to add lights in Blender, you'd see them on this model. Those lights aren't going to show in Spoke, so we don't care about that.
Cool. All right.
Um,
Let's
oh,
export
and one
this.
last thing. Sorry. If for some reason you were like, I'd really like the model to look a little shiny or something, here would be a chance to do it. Bear in mind that would be uniformly shiny or rough across the whole model, but the BSDF node here has a roughness value that if you turn it down, the model starts to get shinier. Whoa,
Whoa.
that's like too
You
shiny.
want like a Terminator
Yeah. Um,
Achilles?
but you could turn it down a little bit. Oh, for some reason the metallic is all the way up on this model. This is a
and it doesn't have.
yeah,
Hmm.
this is like a carved stone statue, so I don't think we need metallic up at all. And now when you play with the shininess, it looks a little more like
Yeah, no, it's
marble
marble.
as opposed to
Probably a
chrome.
little rougher than that.
You'd probably want it pretty high up, like
Yeah,
zero point 0.8 or something.
cool. Looks great.
So that looks pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and export this. Oh, the texture size. We still haven't done the texture
Yeah,
size.
still need to do the textures.
So when this came in, um, this base color node, which is just a an image texture node, uh, got the texture for this model already plugged into it. And right now I can clear it out completely and add a new one, or I can update this existing one and then reload it and it'll
Hmm.
be smaller. Um, I think when I tried this before, it kind of yelled at me and said like, no, this is packed into the file. You have to unpack it. And that's a weird concept here in Blender, but basically inside this image texture node, there's this little, looks like a little toaster. I don't know what that's supposed to be. Is that a toaster?
I don't know.
Looks like a box with some stuff
Unpack.
in it.
They're
Unpack
taking it out of
item.
the box.
Take it out of the box. If you click on that, then it'll let you clear this out or change it. So if you unpack it and then it asks you, do you want to put it here or somewhere else or blah blah blah. The first one is fine. Doesn't really matter. Um,
Now you can actually do that.
Now I can actually edit this texture
Okay.
and do stuff with it. But uh, do we really want to see me edit this in Photoshop, or can we?
No, can we just skip ahead to you?
Let's just skip ahead and pretend that I did it. Because
But basically, what you're going to want to do is this is a 4K texture. You're going to want to scale it down to probably 2K or 1K. I think 2K would probably be,
for this hero model,
yeah.
I'd keep it pretty high. It has some detail in it.
And whatever photo editor you're using, it can be anything that can open a JPEG. So you could do this in Paint if you want to, seriously. Um, just make sure that when you export it, it's same
Are you
format.
implying that Microsoft Paint is inferior
Oh, it's great. It's a great,
to
yeah,
Photoshop?
that's what I use. Um, you just need to make sure that it's also exported as a JPEG. You can also do some compression on the, like you can set the JPEG quality 80% is fine. It's going to keep your file size fairly low. And just know that if you're resizing something that was a PNG, it might be because it had alpha channel information. So things might not be
Transparency.
transparent if you don't save it back as a PNG. Same,
JPEGs do not have transparency.
right. And same thing if it was not, usually your GLTF will come out into multiple textures. If it's a base color texture, it's totally fine to keep it as a JPEG, or go from PNG to JPEG if it doesn't have any transparency information.
Right.
But if you use if it's a data texture, so if it's
And
the
by data,
metallic
that means like
roughness,
normal map, like the bump
normal
map,
map,
the
you need
roughness map.
you really should keep those as PNG. They shouldn't be lossy. You can get some really weird artifacts, maybe with the metallic roughness map, like maybe something looks shiny in little points
Weird
on
little
the model,
pixels on it
right?
somewhere
When
that
things
just
pixelate, you get some distortion in the data that's presented there.
you
So you
don't
just,
notice it as much on a color map like
right,
this because they just kind of blend in with the rest of the pixels. But yeah, for sure on the roughness or the metallic map, you might get some oddities if you
right.
have weird compression on them. So just bear that in mind. There's a lot of information out there about that kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
um, uh, yeah,
But this one is 4096 pixels by 4096. Make sure you scale it by a factor of 2
yes.
downwards.
You
So,
you always want your 3D file textures to be within powers of 2. So
yeah,
like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128,
512,
256,
256,
512,
512.
1024, 2048,
Yeah,
4096,
one of those. So we should do
8192.
2. Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah,
I think my knowledge stops there.
yeah. So you probably want this to be, yeah, 1024 or 2048, and 1024 by 1024 or 2048 by 2048, and then that'll reduce the download size. It's not going to be 35 megabytes anymore.
Be a lot smaller.
And it's also going to reduce uh, video RAM usage, which is huge. So one thing that you might not know is that file size that you see for the JPEG. So we saw it in Sketchfab is like 6 megs.
Yeah, it
Um,
was pretty high.
when you use that as a texture, it gets uploaded to the GPU in a different format. It's basically a bitmap. So a JPEG is a compressed texture format, and a bitmap is uncompressed. It's just the raw pixel data, and that's because your graphics card doesn't operate on JPEGs or PNGs. It operates on a bitmap or another GPU specific compressed format. So one thing that we're looking at in the future is supporting one of these formats that works across all the devices that we use for hubs, and that's called Basis. And we're really excited to be supporting that in the future. But what you should know is when you're resizing this texture, you're also reducing the amount of video RAM you're using by a lot, actually. So even if the file size doesn't go down that much, just the number of pixels that are in there means that you're going to have a smaller bitmap size. So it's it's really
So
good.
I took this opportunity while Robert was talking technical things to just reduce this thing
Yeah.
down in the background. I'm using Photoshop. I'm not showing this, but I just shrunk this thing in half and I saving it out as a JPEG at like I don't know 60% quality or something. I don't care that much.
So Fernando is asking, do you know if there's any plugin or way to use or export basis textures on Blender? I don't know if there is yet. So it's not 100% finalized in the GLTF specification to use basis in GLTF. And I think this will likely be fairly tied to GLTF, like using basis in Blender, if that were to happen. Um, but I don't know. We'll see. It's an open source project, so anyone's free to add that to it. Um, but we'll have to see. I
I'm
would
making
I
sure
would like to see that.
I did the right one. So the old one was 6.3 megs for that 4K texture. I brought it down to a 2K texture with some compression, and now it's half a meg.
Oh,
So that's quite a difference,
yes.
and we're gonna see that now as I export from Blender. Uh, it's now pointed to the new texture that I made. Um, I don't see that much of a difference, honestly.
Yeah.
It's probably a little lower
If you get
res, but
really close to it, I bet you it's different.
yeah,
But
I mean VR is always a tricky beast
yeah,
because people can actually like
right,
put their faces up against things and see them up close. Um, you kind of have to think about your use case and be like, well, how close are people really going to get to a
right.
texture on a ceiling way
If
above
it's
my
way
head,
off in
or
the distance,
yeah, that
like you
kind of
probably
stuff.
don't have to make it super high resolution. But
Um,
also, you really should just think about like, what do I care about? Do I care about my users being able to download and enter the scene uh, in like quickly? Are they going to stick around for, the 30 plus seconds that it takes to download the scene in order to, you know, just check it out for a little bit?
right,
So,
right.
or do you really want fidelity? If you're using it,
For your portfolio and you
yeah,
want to show a model you created, well,
or you're having some sort of meeting around the asset itself, then you probably want the highest quality possible. But it's up to you.
all right. So here we are. Let's switch back to textured mode. This is our reduced asset, not only in triangles, but also in texture resolution. Plus, we've now moved it to a nice spot, sort of centered in the world. You may find that the pivot point of the model, which is this tiny little orange dot, may not be in the right place on a model, and
Hmm.
that's another really good thing. Like if for some reason I'm gonna fake it here. Let's say that the origin was like way out here. That can cause problems. So you may want to make sure that the origin of your model is the pivot point is truly at the spot where you want. In this
Hmm.
case, I want it right at the 0, 0, 0. Um, Blender has this nice 3D cursor thing, which is a whole other topic, but uh, most people know it because they accidentally left click and put it in the wrong
Yep.
place. I'm going to do a quick, this is your bookmark moment. I'm going to hit Shift S, and then this little menu pops up,
Yep.
and I'm going to tell the cursor to the world origin. So you can hit Shift S and
Shift
then 1.
S
That'll
and
bring
then
the
click.
cursor back to the
Okay.
origin. And then while I'm there and the model is selected, I go up to this object menu, which
You
again,
have to be
my
in
video
object
is
mode.
covering. Have to be in object mode. You choose object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor.
Perfect.
And that will put that orange dot of my model, which is its pivot point, now wherever that 3D cursor is. So it's going to put it there.
Cool.
Just moved it. Now it's in the right spot. So now when I scale and stuff, it'll be in the right place. That was a little bonus tip. But anyway, I'm going to go, now I'm going to select the model, go File, Export, GLTF. Where do I want to save it? I'm just going to save it to my desktop right now. Actually, I'll put it in that Achilles
And we're going
folder.
to export this as a GLB
I'm going to call this
because
statue
Spoke right
Achilles.
now only supports uploading GLB files.
That is true. So down here, the default format is GLB.
Yep.
Um, if you had a bunch of other stuff in your scene, you would want to turn on selected objects only. I don't have anything else in the
Yep.
scene. I don't need it on, but it's there.
And if you
So
had that decimate modifier still on there, would you check
you
that
could turn
apply
on
modifiers?
apply,
Okay.
yeah, and it would apply it on export, but it would
You already applied
still
it,
be
so
there. I
you
already
don't need to
applied
do
it,
that.
so it doesn't matter. You usually want Y up. That is also converting it
Right.
to what we use. These are just really the defaults.
Yep.
You can look through some of the other options in here if your thing has animation, if you want to export, I don't know, camera information with it, or you don't want certain mesh information like the materials or vertex colors or things, you can turn those off.
It's not going to export those if it doesn't have it
Yeah,
either. So
so you
that's
don't have
just
to
if you
worry.
want to force it to not have those.
So I renamed it. I hit export GLTF. Sometimes it takes a minute
Right.
as it goes through its process. There's not a lot of feedback when it does that, except for like a little spinning cursor maybe. Um, and then it did it.
Cool.
How do we know it did it? Well, we need to switch over to Spoke and bring it in and see what happened. So I'm going to go back to our web browser here. Those that are new to Spoke, Spoke runs in a web browser. It's pretty exciting. Let's see.
So we can just keep that there.
We
We'll
can
just replace it.
we can replace what we have.
Yeah.
The only thing we
So,
may want to do is bring the scale back down to 1.
oh right.
Uh,
Oh, but
its
then we're gonna have to
original
move it
tiny
down.
size.
Eh. Let's just get rid of
Should we
it.
just get rid of it?
Yeah.
Let's just delete it and make it again.
Okay.
So rather than pulling this from Sketchfab now, we're actually going to upload it from our computer into here. And there's a couple ways to do that. I like to, let me expand this a little bit so you can see it. I go to the section called My Assets, and you can see I've got a bunch of models and images and things in here. You can switch to models or images or videos or whatever if you want to filter. And at the top of the panel here in the corner, it says Upload. I'm going to click that. I'm going to find that GLB that I saved. Here it is, Statue Achilles. You can see the size now. It's only 8 megs total.
Oh, that's pretty good.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
It says uploading. Now it drops it into your list here. It does not drop it into the scene until you actually go to do that. So um, you can do the same thing I did before where you right click and place it at the origin, or now that we know the pivot's in a good spot,
Yep.
it's fine to click it and drag it in, or just click it and
It'll add
place
it
it
to your
that way.
cursor, and then you
Looks
can
like
press Q and E to rotate it.
boop, boop, boop. I have my
Oh, you have
snaps at the
yours
top
stuff
set to
too.
15 degrees,
That's
so
cool.
might put it on a little dramatic angle there. And there it is, uh, in the scene.
Perfect. And it still looks great.
Looks good. Now, actually, lights will hit it
Yeah.
because before it was self-illuminated. Now, if we start adding lighting to the scene, you'll actually see it moving across those surfaces. Even though it already has some lighting built into the texture itself, it'll still look pretty good.
Right. Cool. So we should try this out in hubs,
Oh yeah, we should
and
just
then
publish it and see what
let's
happens.
work
I'm
on
gonna drop
lighting.
it back at 0, 0, 0. Hey, there we go. the middle of the room ish.
Yep. I think we should make it bigger.
It's not big enough for you.
No,
All right.
I want to
You can
be
use the
impressed,
scale
you know?
tool. You can hit Y, or you can hit. Uh, you can scroll the little numbers up here if you want to be more precise. How about 1.5? That feels
Yeah.
kind of good. More dramatic. All right. Now there are some lights in the scene already. I'm not going to worry about those. The only thing you may want to change about this model is like it's right now by default set to walkable. Like, I don't know if I need to be able to walk on this model, but
Hmm.
collidable I kind of like because then objects would bounce off it and stuff. But right now it's not casting or receiving any shadows of the scene. So any lighting from this sunlight is not going to make any shadows. Now I have my viewport set to lit up here,
Mm-hmm.
so lit,
So
but it's
lit.
not. It doesn't have shadows on. I'm going to turn the shadows on so we can see that. Okay, so there's a lot of shadow in this room because this whole room is probably casting a shadow.
Mm-hmm.
But we may want to set this to receive and cast shadows.
Right. And there we go. Now it looks like it's grounded in the scene.
Yeah, it has more of the lighting of the surrounding room, whereas before it looked a little bit lit by the outside light, and now the room is blocking it. We'll play around with the lighting more later, but let's just publish this again. You're not going to see the changes in hubs until you hit publish to hubs again. It keeps all the settings you had before. It also saves the scene while doing it, so your spoke scene gets saved, and you can hit view your scene again, or if, like me, you never closed that scene you had open before, you can just hit refresh in your browser, so I don't have to make the room all over again. It's just loading up all the new
Yeah.
information. There it
There it
is.
is. Looks wow, that looks really good.
It looks pretty good. Um, the lighting, having it have lighting made it feel more grounded
Right.
in the room.
It's a little dark in the room.
Yeah, it's kind of dark in here, but let's look at our stats now. What's our triangle count? We are down to 30,000.
That's pretty good.
Considering it was almost 300,000
Yeah.
before, we
Yeah.
brought it down.
And the terrain isn't nothing.
Yep,
We're still at what, 10,000 for this thing?
still see plenty of detail
Yep.
on it, even scaled up. But this is a, you know, performing asset now. It
Yeah,
works. You could probably have a couple of these in the scene and you'd still be okay.
probably. Cool. So let's